More science, better policy. With this motto, last Thursday a new organization, the National Scientific Advisory Office, ONAC, was presented in Madrid. Pedro Sánchez himself attended the event and announced the hiring of more than 50 scientific advisors to the general administration of the state. Among other things, each ministry will have its own scientific advisor, who the Moncloa website assures will be dedicated exclusively to connecting the questions that your ministry will have with the answers from universities and public centers of investigation. The president spoke of a milestone, a transformative step, rigor and efficiency, and a measure that would change the country for the better in the long term. Of course, the proposal was received with enthusiasm among a good part of Hispanic journalism academicism. How to be against science gaining importance in government action. In the face of political tactics, science, thus, with a capital letter. Faced with the short-termism of the next electoral call, science. In the face of populist measures that are unknown if they are effective, science. Everything very clean, very neat, very modern. To me, however, of all the measures approved by this government in the last 6 years, I think it is the one that scares me the most. Some will say that the amnesty or the only yes means yes law is worse. And yes, those are more damaging to the institutional building. But pure rejection, a feeling of deception from start to finish and fear of the long-term consequences, I have not felt with any advertisement like this one from ONAC. Of all the fashions of our day, there is none so dangerous as that of the praise of science. It is dangerous in almost any area, but becomes corrosive when mixed with politics. No wonder some of the most criminal regimes in history were filled with scientists. The temptation to organize human beings around a mathematical formula is irresistible. First of all, because it insulates you from criticism. How to fail a measure backed by science. One thing is this or that partisan law. A norm backed by the consensus, also in capital letters, or the evidence is quite another. In reality, science does not exist. What exists are scientists who sometimes hold positions contrary to those of their colleagues. Discoveries or advances that always seem very solid until someone else refutes them. Theses that sometimes are confirmed and that on other occasions are proven false when no one expected it. Look for key issues that may affect our political or social organization on which there is consensus, you will not find them. Furthermore, the mixture of social and natural sciences is also dangerous. Their methods should have almost nothing in common. The same as your conclusions. The economy of the last half-century, with its pretensions to accuracy and mathematization of reality, is the best example of misuse of what is called the scientific method. Nor can we buy that idea of the scientist investigates and then passes his conclusions to the politician so that he can adapt his laws to the conclusions of the experiment. In a ministry, what happens is that the minister asks and the others start looking for how to comply with what they have been ordered. As Benito Aranada said the other day on Twitter, this is not evidence-based politics, but evidence-based politics. That is, tell me what law you want to approve and I will find the scientist who justifies and defends it. By the way, this goes for a ministry, but also for any private organization. Every time you read a report, on any subject, ask yourself who commissioned it. And not so much because whoever writes it is going to write it down to dictation from those who pay. There are hitmen everywhere, also among economists, physicists, or biologists. But that doesn't usually happen. In reality, the relationship is the opposite. Whoever pays already knows, more or less, what each scientist thinks. And he commissions the work to which he senses that he will write, more or less, what interests him. That's why he is entrusted with it precisely. This does not invalidate the thesis of the Shift report in any way. But let's not fool ourselves. From a ministry with a scientific advisor to a bank with a research service, the objective is for them to say what you want them to say, not to sit and wait for a scientist to discover something that will make them completely change their priorities. For this reason, he preferred it when they told us that they approved the housing law because it came out of their noses, not because his advisors recommended it. Because, furthermore, even if we accept the independence of the scientist, there are many ways in which the politician can influence. For example, giving budgetary resources to those who are going to investigate what interests you and taking them away from those who could get you into trouble. Another way to manipulate public opinion, give a lot of relevance to what does not have it. How many studies do you remember in the last decade on male school failure? And about the presence of women in science careers? Well, this could only be interpreted as an attitude of certain caution regarding the misuse of science by politics. But not. What I'm saying is that it always seems dangerous to me when politics uses science. For a triple reason. First of all, because something that we all admire is used: scientific work, technological progress, the human drive to go one step further, to justify political whim. Again, a whim that can be positive or negative. This article applies to both good and bad laws, but is based on what political decisions have always been: the needs of the ruler in power or the ideological priorities of the. I'm not saying it has to be any other way. What I'm saying is, don't fool us with false excuses. Secondly, because, in itself, the idea that politics must be brought closer to science seems wrong to me. There is no single, eternal, untouchable way to organize human societies. Politics should be humble and fearful. A constant process of trial and error, taking care of what already exists even if you don't know why it is there or how it started, and that he makes few changes, and always looking askance at the way to retrace the path taken if we see that the walls begin to wobble after removing that little stone that seemed to be of no use. Faced with this precautionary principle, scientific policy, and the last 100 years should have cured us against that temptation, is overwhelming and arrogant. How not to change everything, if the laboratory results are unequivocal or if the paper's recommendations point in that direction? The organicist pretension, the fatal arrogance that Hayek denounced, will be much more powerful if it has numerical support. And, finally, because if the politician who uses science is dangerous, the scientist who becomes a politician is much more dangerous. The wise man who one day feels that he has power. The scholar who has been told that all his hours of work will now serve to shape society. That does give me chills. Look, for example, what is happening with climate change. From the temperature gauge, yes, for 150 years the average temperature of the planet has increased by just over 1 degree, to the recommendations of the UN panel: what to eat, how move, what population the planet can support, when the resources will run out. There has only been one small step. The first thing, the average temperature thing, is science, sometimes contaminated by poorly designed incentives, but science. Everything else is pure and simple politics. It is not surprising that the largest social engineering project of the last half-century is permanently supported by scientists. With how wise they are and all the numbers and graphs they throw in our faces, who would dare to object?